There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all well. I'm just going to quickly start off by doing a sound check. So if you can hear me, please can you type yes into the chat box? Just lets me know that we're live. You can hear us. We're not talking to ourselves. Are we there? Let's just wait for some answers to come in. Are we there? Chat box should be on the right-hand side at the top. Let's have a look. Presenters, you can hear me okay? Yep, fantastic. Perfect. There we go. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there must be a delay with the question with the chat coming through. Fantastic. Thank you for letting me know you can hear us. So welcome everybody. My name's Chantal Newton and I'm the marketing manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping rules before we begin. My first one is that this system does offer closed captioning. So if you, live captioning. So if you feel that this would help you, there is an option. There's a little box with 2 C's in it. It does say beta at the top. Press on that and live captioning will be enabled for you. You can do things like adjust the color and everything to suit what you need. Throughout this session, we want to encourage you to ask questions to our panel. So please use the questions box to pose any questions that you have. We will address those with the panel at the end of the session. We've set some time aside to have a chat there. That's all from me for now. So I'm going to pass you over to the very lovely Andy Baines to get this session started. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Chantal. I'm not too sure about the lovely. So I'm going to get our guest speakers and fellow panel members to introduce themselves in a second. I will say this is a first for the UK Contact Centre Forum, talking about cybercrime in the world of contact centres. I'll come back to that in a second. But what we've done is got somebody from a national police force and somebody from a well-known contact centre organisation. So I guess police force first. If we hand over to James, and you can just say a few words about yourself and the police force you work for, without me stealing your thunder.
Sure, Anthony. Thank you for inviting me. So my name's James Morley. I'm the CTO for British Transport Police. It's the national police force which oversees the railways and stations. So I've been here for 6 years now. I come from a very technical background, so I'm only starting to get used to the CTO role and all the admin that it entails. But my main area is in networks and cybersecurity, and in my current role, I cover the infrastructure, networks, applications, cybersecurity, and communications teams, which oversee a lot of elements, but what's most relevant for this call is it covers the contact centers and our control rooms.
Brilliant.
And
Thanks,
our CCTV network.
And I'll just say, one of the unusual things about Ben's world is it's a police force that polices an area the size of Berkshire that happens to be in long, thin strips throughout the UK. So statistically, I think the chance of you running into a British Transport Police officer is probably higher than many of the other forces. But we'll dive into some of the exotic natures of their world in a second. And then over to Ben, please.
Hi, my name's Ben Speed. I am the, I have to try and get this right now, I am the Cyber Defence Vulnerability Management and Testing Manager. Basically, I work for Direct Line Group in their cyber defence function. We basically are the assurance function. So I look after VM, I look after the pen testing, red teaming, purple teaming, as well as some cyber threat intelligence functions as well from that perspective. Been in DLG for 9 months or so, mainly brought on board to in-source the vulnerability management function within cyber defence.
Brilliant. And I guess I should introduce myself, and thanks again, Ben. Andy Bates from Sapphire, so Technology Director. Sapphire is a UK wholly owned and operated IT and OT cybersecurity defence organisation. If you don't know what OT means, it's operational technology like CCTV, like Ben mentioned, and also worked for many years in a not-for-profit founded by the New York District Attorney and the City of London Police. So kind of been in the kind of global charity sector as well as the commercial sector. I'll start off with a health warning. I mean, obviously, the folks on this call, all three of us, we want to give you as much advice as we can. I can't ask Ben or James how they do their cybersecurity and what their passwords are, because that would be bad in a public forum. Likewise, we want to encourage all of you to ask as many questions as you can, but obviously avoid specific detail about individuals or personal data, because again, this is recorded. It would be terrible for a cybersecurity webinar to cause a cybersecurity breach. I'll also say one of the things we were ruminating about was, do we make this webinar about general cybersecurity, and the UK Contact Centre Forum just happens to be a group of businesses, let's say in the UK, or do we look at contact center specifics? We're going to try and do the latter, which is probably the harder way to do this, but we'd rather start with the hard stuff. But if you've got any generic questions around cyber, as we got CTOs and CISOs on today's call, put them in the question thing. We'll try and answer them as best as we can. Probably an hour isn't long enough, or 45 minutes isn't long enough, but fire things in. If there's things we don't answer, we'll try and get them back to you, or try and get them back to you with UKCCF. So I guess it's my job to kind of fire off some questions to get us all going, get us into the mood. So one of the things I wanted to start with in the contact center specific world, and I'm going to start with Ben on this to ease us in, is I think one of the things that probably annoys the industry and certainly annoys citizens is people impersonating contact centers. So people pretending to be direct line. I don't think I ever get anybody pretending to be the police, James. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And is it causing a brand reputation within the industry? Is it something that people in the UKCCF should be worried about?
I think it's a frustration more than a brand problem. I think there's two camps. There's people that will fall foul and will be susceptible to these types of impersonations that happen, and are people that it just wastes time, and is just an annoyance. I think it's the danger we've got is they are getting more and more and more intelligent. There are some very obvious ones. There are some very, very obvious ones that you can tell it's computer generated voices, or it's an AI bot sort of giving you a script. You can confuse it, as I try like to do if I've got the time to. But it is very much that you can tell it's a spoof call or it's a spam call. I think the real problem is that they are becoming cleverer and cleverer in terms of spoofing the organizations. They're using the right words, they're using the right terminology to make them seem legitimate. And I think that's where the real risk comes. And I think that's forming a combination of getting experience potentially from people that are sort of former contact centers employees and understanding sort of the scripts and the language that organizations use. But it's also around just being a bit more human and a bit more relatable to the people they're calling. But I don't really feel I haven't seen a real brand impact, but I could be wrong.
And I guess a question to that. So we, and especially I, do a lot of ransomware simulations, which is where we get boards and C-suites to run around in the event that ransomware actually happens. And I think one thing people forget is that ransomware is an all-consuming thing. And one of the things I've found is that it's probably so easy to impersonate people's email, and we've even done deep fake where we've just taken a few minutes of a webinar like this and been able to impersonate people. People sort of forget the contact center world and forget how easy it is to be tricked into doing the wrong things. In fact, sometimes we get a journalist to call people up and people just say the wrong thing at the wrong time. So I guess, James, I'm going to lean to you a little bit more, because people in the police and the military are good at this kind of command and control thing, but other organizations tend to get a bit stressed. But in terms of, I suppose where I'm going with this is, it's inbound impersonations to organizations, less so into a contact center. But I wonder if you got any thoughts around that.
It's definitely on the rise. From a chief officer group, they're most likely to be a victim of this, because it's the most public people in their organizations who will be the target of deepfakes. I think the last I heard, if you have 30 seconds of someone talking, that is enough for someone to deepfake. And we've done numerous trainings on this, and it always comes down to humans are always going to be the weakest element in cybersecurity, especially with deepfake and AI making it even more. But there's always that uncanny valley. You will always know the way someone's speaking, they're using words they don't normally use if you know them. And it's essentially, if you're not 100% sure it's them, put the phone down. If it's a bad actor, they're always going to try to rush you into a decision, where you can always put the phone down and contact that individual on a trusted method of communication. When it comes to contact centers, they're even more of a target, because contact centers, I think, Ben, you would probably ever say, are more on your turnover, but a higher turnover means that there's a higher risk of people not knowing everyone, and then at that point being tricked into doing something they shouldn't be doing.
And I guess you got a good point there, and without putting anybody on the spot, I think Joe Public gets the impression that contact centres are a very high-pressured environment. In other words, answering more calls in a day is probably in somebody's PKI. So that almost lends itself to that point you mentioned there, James. It makes you naturally more vulnerable to cyber trickery.
Yes, we need to make those decisions quickly. I think that's more in Ben's world. In my world, although quick calls are definitely part of it, as we've got resource, we need to get to the public sooner. The quality of the calls are also more important because we need to make sure we've got all that information to pass on to the frontline officers. But that doesn't mean that the issue of making mistakes or people tricking us into doing something is not a real world risk.
I mean, while we're with you, Ben, and I think it's compulsory always to, sorry, while we're with you, James, it's always compulsory to mention AI on all webinars and things these days. And people see it as an issue. But I guess in your world, you've got almost the risk of what I'd call a contact center DDoS. So DDoS is distributed denial of service, which is well known in the cyber world. But the concept that loads of people could pick up 999 or 101 or send in 61016 to you, if let's say a bomb goes off or a train falls over or there's something big happen at, let's say, Wembley Stadium, there's a danger of you just being overrun. And then I guess in that case, AI could be something to be useful to augment humans and take that stress away.
It could be. I think, personally, AI at this point in time is everyone saying everything's AI powered. I think it's a great marketing ploy, and you have to really find out what is the true AI and what AI model they're using behind it. Yes, AI can have a significant impact on, especially on high demand events, and not just for if there was a train derailment, but just for scheduled events. Notting Hill Carnival is one of our biggest events. On that day, we know we're going to get 10 times more messages through than any other day. So AI, especially large language models, they excel in understanding text and being able to prioritize urgent messages way more than a human can do. So we would be able to prioritize messages coming through regarding knife incidents and assaults, and people asking for the train times because they don't know what 61164 can be deprioritized to automatic response. The issue with cybersecurity, the issue with AI, although it can help cybersecurity in one way, would still need to be concerned about the data governance on where the information is going to be processed through the model. But then also from a policing element, there's the ethical considerations of the use of AI. In the police guidelines for the use of AI, there's the human oversight element of it, which states that AI should assist and not replace humans. Yeah. And any critical decisions need to be made by humans. Well, the main use for an AI in this situation for 6116 for the text messages that come in would be to help prioritize it and to take those messages, explain what's going on, and do a lot of the heavy lifting for the human. But even if the AI model is 99.99% accurate and gets it all right, there's still 1 in 10,000 where it gets it wrong, and if that's a knife crime, that's a serious issue. So there will have to be those discussions in future about the risks we're willing to take, which is all cybersecurity is at the end of the day. There's doing IT well, but also risk management on the AI models, how much risk we're willing to take.
And you're right, and forgive me, compared to a lot of the contact center industry, you've got the challenge of threat of life to the public. And I think in that case, although, and it's a good case, AI can augment the contact center, but it does introduce some security concerns, and we'll come back to that. That 0.001% where it gets it wrong, you can never prove would a human operator have got it better in that particular situation, because you can't rerun the full situation, can you?
No, and I've just finished my dissertation for my MBA, and it was regarding trust and legitimacy in the policing on the railway and how technology impacts it. And one of the big things there was trust and legitimacy for policing is very much the perception of policing doing the right thing. Using an AI model, which would definitely have a great impact on cybersecurity, especially regarding SMS DOS spam attacks, is the right thing from a technology standpoint. But that 1 in 10,000 is what will be on all the newspapers that we did the wrong thing. So there will always be that element that if it's technically the right thing, how we can make sure that it will be perceived as the right thing as well.
At this point, I'm wishing that we'd set up a poll, which I know is possible on this technology. So I'm going to do a bit of a verbal poll just to check that the audience is still with us. And I'll put you two guys on the spot with this. But I want to ask the audience, has everybody heard of 7726? Has everybody heard of the 159 phone number? And has everybody heard of Daisy from O2? And I think Daisy from O2, he says in air quotes, is probably the one I'll talk about. So if you haven't heard of those things, so we will not name and shame you. Please put something in the questions to say you'd not heard of one of those three while we quickly explain them. But Ben and James, have you come across Daisy, or should I talk a little bit more about what Daisy is?
I've had a very brief glance at Daisy, but by all means,
So
explain
look,
away.
I mean, and we can share this with everybody. Please, after this call, clearly Google Daisy from O2, and it's an AI chatbot that is basically impersonating an old lady to waste scammers' time. And it's a multi-platform AI thing where, and I mentioned right at the top of the call, where people are impersonating contact centers and effectively not defrauding you, the organizations, they're defrauding your customers in your name. And O2 have invented this because criminals clearly use auto dialers and work their way through phone numbers. So when they spot it's from a criminal or spamming phone number, Daisy basically keeps them on the line, and it's really funny and worth watching the YouTube video. But it's a good example, which I like, which I'll touch on with 159 in a second. Having come from the commercial world and tried to do my best to fight cybercrime in a small way, it's a really good example of a commercial organization trying to make the contact center and the industry a better place, as opposed to, excuse me, something making a noise there, trying to make the contact center industry and the telco industry a cleaner place rather than just protect themselves. So please go and look up Daisy. 7726. Who wants to explain to the audience what that's all about?
Guess I could, as it's in my area a bit more.
There you go.
So,
As
I think, isn't
you on
that
this
what
call
you
are the
worked
king
with
of
my...
all things to do with text, by the way, James. So it's always going to come to you.
So it's the fraud action line, isn't it? Or fraud relating to the fraud in City of London Police, what you set up with with my Deputy Chief Constable.
That's 159. Well, cute. So we'll do 159 first of all. So yeah, 159 was an idea myself and somebody, who's now at BTP, and we all had a bit of an idea. If you dial 159, if you've had a cybercrime or fraud, it routes you through to your bank. So typically to your bank's contact center. They can deal with the fraud, stop the money going to the criminals live, and then they electronically report it through to Action Fraud, City of London Police. You get a crime number, things happen. So again, I think that's something I'd like to talk more about on today's session with the wider UKCCF, I guess. But 7726 in the world of text, a lot of people don't know this, that if you get a spam text or indeed a phishing call, so somebody calling you who's annoying, you can send that number to 7726. It goes through to NCSC, which, as we all know, is a division of GCHQ. And I think last year they took down 230,000 spoofing websites, and I think allegedly that stopped about 13 million phishing incidents. So incidents which either would have started with a phone call or a text. I thought most people know about the text angle, but doing a little bit of research, if you get somebody impersonating a contact center, you can also send that to 7726. So where I think I want to go with that is it kind of gets into the area of, and excuse me for this, I think contact centers from a cyber point of view, Ben's job is to make sure people don't attack direct line and keep things safe in a cyber world. There's all these other tools which we could probably give to all of your customers that makes them safer, and then that makes the wider community safer. But I don't know if there's any other thoughts we've got around that. And I'm not seeing any questions come through from the audience. So clearly everybody knows about 7726159 and Daisy, which is good news. I should have asked the question the other way around. If you have heard of any of the above, please put something in the questions.
There's a couple of questions, Andy. I don't know if you can see them. There's a couple of comments. Sorry. So a couple of people had heard of Daisy, but there's a few people that hadn't actually heard of any of them. So it's interesting.
There we go. Clearly my questions box thingamabob isn't working, but there we go. Thanks for that, Chantal. Well, hopefully we've all learned something from that point as well. I guess while we're on Daisy, that points me to a bit of a demographic question, and I think you've both probably got an opinion on this. I'm happily to be shouted down, but I think young people tend to know how to use apps and various things that are on their smartphones, and the sometimes older or sometimes less digitally enabled generation tend to default to contact centers. So is there an association between use of contact center and fear of the internet? Is there a conversation we can have about channel shift there? Or have I got it wrong?
I don't think you've got it wrong. I think there's that ease piece, certainly from an engagement perspective. I mean, ultimately, if you look at a typical customer journey that one of our customers may experience, is you've got the sales journey, which I think older generations would probably prefer to speak to somebody to help them through it, and younger would probably be more happy to do things on an app and through a website, and do an online journey. I think from a claims perspective, I think it is probably not much of a split. I think there's probably still the people that probably want the ease of being able to claim on an app and or at least follow the journey through an app. But probably when you get to that claims point, you probably want to speak to someone. You probably want that assurance that, oh, actually someone has got this, someone is dealing with it, not I've logged something on an app somewhere and it's disappeared into a black hole.
So there's a feeling that somebody cares about me when my house is flooded, talking to someone, as opposed to an app, and it may feel like it's fallen into a black hole.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do get there is that in terms of that initial engagement and probably the initial sort of sales journey, shall we say, is probably that split between the older generation wanting to speak to someone and the younger generation happy and want to use a digital or online experience.
And James, I guess comments from your world, because 61016 is you've got an issue. You're in the transport police area. Are there other options, or are there any thoughts around that demographic?
I think it is very much a split between people do what they are used to and most comfortable with, and the younger generations grew up with texting, text message language. My nephews have never phoned me, but they're constantly texting. So it makes it a lot easier, but then it's also the investment of time versus what's happened. So from a policing perspective, most of our 61116 messages are people highlighting things that don't directly affect them, but they've seen it, they're texting it, so we can have that information to address it. Where direct victims of crime or people who are more closely impacted more likely are going to call because they've had that impact on them, so they're more willing to invest more time rather than a quick 10 seconds text message.
And as Ben said, they're more likely to default to 999 or those kind of channels because they're in an urgent situation, clearly.
Yes, I think that's what we don't want for 61116. I think this was the rationale between choosing a 5-digit number and also having it as that number.
Yeah.
999 is the UK's emergency number. At no point do we want to have people calling any other number to avoid any confusions. So it makes natural sense that people, when they do call it, they're going to call that and not a BTP or individual police force number.
Yeah, it's a well-recognised brand. I know we touched on it earlier, and I think you may have just come to it, and I wanted to come back to it, James. The insider threat question. So everybody in the world of cyber will tell you that 95% of all cyber incidents happen with a phishing attack, and I'm a great one for saying 37.4% of all statistics are made up, because it's really hard to prove what criminals are actually doing because they're criminals. But one of the big next vectors that always comes out is insider threat. I'm conscious of the fact that the contact center industry has a reputation for a high turnover of staff for good reasons and bad. I think I've heard 30-40% of staff churn in a few years ago. Is that still a concern? And without delving into too much detail, how can we mitigate that? Does AI start to become an answer? Is there a technological answer to churn of staff other than try not to churn staff?
I think I'll probably pass this one to Ben, as I know his area's probably got more turnover. And the insider threat, although it is still very much a threat within the police force, we are less at risk because we have to go through quite a lot of vetting before our employees can start working. But the insider threat for us would more be users either making mistakes or being tricked into something rather than a malicious action. I think Ben would probably have a bit more insight from his area.
I will say, just as we hand over to Ben, when I worked for Verizon, the Verizon DBIR is the big report that's always quoted with all the stats. Just below insider threat was always human error. And I do wonder that if there's an insider and they get caught doing something wrong, the ability to say, I made a mistake, as opposed to fess up to being an insider, there's quite a good interface between catching malicious insiders and humans making a mistake, and you don't have the evidence to prove. So to me, they're in a similar bucket in my brain somewhere. But sorry, Ben, over to you.
I think it's is probably the difference in how I look at it and how I frame it. Is you've got the sort of intentional and unintentional insider risk. The unintentional is someone has been a spam or a phishing message has got through any controls and capabilities that you've got from a gateway perspective. It's got through, it's been convincing enough that someone has clicked on it, has clicked on the link, and they provided their credentials. Could it be classified as an insider risk? Possibly not, but it may be an unintentional one, and you get that sort of someone has made a mistake and just thought they were doing the right thing. You do then have that insider risk, and I think there is that concern with high churn, and there is that concern, and particularly with, I don't necessarily think it's maybe a high turn piece. It's probably more about cost of living. I think with the cost of living crisis, being reached out to by criminals to go, oh, actually, I've stalked you on LinkedIn. I know you work for a large UK contact centre. We'll pay you X amount for customer details. I think that becomes the risk, and that's a thing that I'm sort of aware of in our space, not necessarily specifically within DLG, but certainly in sort of the insurance and sort of finance sector, is very much across that piece and seeing that from that space. And I think that's where I think coming back to the AI piece and to touch on James's point, I think every vendor. I mean, I've been in information security in one way, shape, or form for 20 plus years. And I'm seeing some products over the last sort of 2 years that still do exactly the same that they did 5 years ago. They just got a nice AI sticker or powered by AI sticker on them. They're not much different than they have been. They've just used model and data and things they see to do good things. Yes, some of them are actually moving in the space to be enriched. But this is where some of those capabilities and some of the things that are coming from some of the big players and some of the big sort of product spaces, particularly to let's say Microsoft stack. Certainly, if you've got an organization that uses or is a large Microsoft consumer, there are a number of insider risk capabilities that you can see that will look at chats, we'll look at email conversations, we'll look at those and web logs and things like that to actually start flagging things to go, oh, this person looks like they could be an insider risk. So I think there's capabilities coming now that sort of give us that from a cyber perspective or from an information security perspective, allow us to monitor and react quicker to these types of threats.
It's the upside of AI, isn't it? There's two things out to that, and I like what you said right at the start. So without giving too much detail away, my Samsung smart washing machine, when I've turned it on recently, because that's how trendy I am that I use my washing machine, it literally said, please wait, optimizing AI. And there's absolutely no AI in that unless I've had some AI in my trouser pocket and it came out in the wash. So I think the marketing of AI is distracting security professionals, in my opinion, because then technically I should do a full code evaluation of my washing machine to make sure it's secure and it's not trying to end the world. So yeah, I hear what you say there, Ben, that some stickers have been put on some equipment and now it's actually coming to maturity. So I think there's a strong buyer beware message there. There's another point I want to pick up there, which is, I guess, I mean, people who work for GCHQ clearly don't put on their LinkedIn and their social media, I work for GCHQ or MI6. In fact, there's a big problem of them having no social media profile, so it makes them look like a spook. I guess to what you said, I would be advising all contact center operators not to say, I work in the direct line contact center, it's really a lovely place to work. And yet actually you really probably like them to be doing that. So there's a fine line there between kind of saying a good thing on social media and accidentally becoming a target for cyber criminals. And I don't have a right answer to that, but I think us all thinking about that's not a bad place. But yeah, any thoughts, both of you, around that? I mean, James, it applies equally as well to police officers and investigators, doesn't it? Are there any learnings from your world that we can spread into the commercial world?
When we had our last all hands call, LinkedIn came up quite a bit, and I think there was a great training video. I can't remember who was the one who created it, but it was called Think Before You Link, and it was very much explaining to people goes back to what you explained to your children. People on the internet are not who you think they are all the time. It doesn't take much to create a LinkedIn profile. And it was an absolutely very clear, people clicking, connecting to lots of people. being invited to events, and then it actually being a completely malicious actor just gathering information. And we do run quite a lot of training exercises looking at open source information such as LinkedIn, which you can get a lot of information from LinkedIn. You can find out who you work for, who your boss is, lots of just key information about your work. Combine that with people saying when they're going on holiday, and then at that point you've got a perfect target for a social engineering attack, for someone to call up your help desk, try to get that password reset for your account, and then target your estate from within, or because one user has given away all of the security questions on their LinkedIn. And also, just like if you was going away, pretty much telling a robber to rob your house, you've now told a cyber criminal, hello, yes, I'm away. My account for next week won't be noticed that I'm doing anything wrong.
Yeah. So there's an advice there for most people's customers in that they're inadvertently, as you say, advertising to people that they're not monitoring things. I guess for a high net worth individual, that's probably really good advice. I think for the 20 or 30 million people who are calling one or other of your contact centers, is that a level of paranoia too far? But I hear what you're saying. I think I'm focusing more on it's almost like police officers have to manage their social profile. Probably contact center people need to do that as well. But again, it's within the police world, it's mandated according to statute and employment contracts. Whereas in contact center world, commercial contact center world, Ben, it would probably be seen as a little bit draconian. But I suppose if we conclude that by saying if we do proper cyber awareness training to let people know some of the things that could be happening, then they can make an informed decision. That's kind of where we get to.
It's bringing it to life.
Yeah.
I will use an example from one of my previous organisations. There was a awareness campaign around social media presence, to the point where the team that did the exercise could, through Strava and various other things, actually follow that person all the way from the office to their home, and they actually rocked up on their doorstep. I filmed it all for educational purposes and everything else, but turned up on their doorstep and went, we know you work for this organisation. We followed you on Strava. You sort of so we could rock up at your house, and we know what bike you've got, and what you like doing, and when you're out, and when you're so on and so forth. But I think from a security perspective, I think it's bringing it to life. And actually, once we started to socialize that with people, you start having the, I never really thought about that type conversations. Whereas if you just have the standard rinse and repeat awareness videos, awareness campaigns, and don't really bring it to life for people, I think that's where people go, I've just clicked.
Yeah, completely agree. So whenever we do cyber training, we try and make it fun and like a bit of a TED talk, 80 minutes to make it engaging. And one of the rules is always to give somebody something to make the hairs on the back of their neck stand up, and also to give somebody they didn't know. So the 7726159 Daisy thing is today's did you know this? So I almost want I do want everybody on this call to be going and telling their friends and their family about those kind of things. But you're right. If we can crack cyber engagement and use some of those things from the government sector, the way the spooks behave, and put it into the contact center, well, I think that's a really good answer. That's a really good outcome. Chantel, I'm not seeing any questions coming in, but I think that could be because something's broken on my question scene. Is there any questions you've got already that you want to talk us through? Because I can't see them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I need to make you an organizer, Andy, but I didn't want to do that and end up kicking you out. So, I'm happy to ask the
Why
question.
don't you read some out? Why don't we go old school?
Absolutely. So we have a question here that says, how can small to mid-sized contact centers implement robust cybersecurity on a limited budget?
Oh, well, I'll go first on that one. So throughout my career, I've always had a 8-pager PDF document of free stuff. And Sapphire has a free stuff pack, which is just the free stuff I've collected and or made, ranging from Quad 9 to 159 and 7726. Downside of free stuff is please don't Google free cybersecurity tools, because you will get Russian-made VPNs that steal your passwords and empty your bank account. Whereas having free stuff from people on this call via UKCCF. So we'd be happy to send that round. And if the Daisy video isn't in there, in fact, that's probably a good follow-on. I've whittled on about some things that some people haven't heard about. Things like DMARC and those kind of things are in there. So I guess that would be answer one, if that helps said person. One thing, by the way, which I'm a religious zealot about, is a thing called DMARC. And we regularly prove that we can impersonate around 70% of UK businesses using their corporate email without hacking into their email system. They just need to turn this thing on. It's a relatively easy thing to turn on, but one of my obsessions is that people get obsessed about AI in boards. And when we do ransomware simulation, I normally show most chief execs an email that they've written with their email that has got my spelling mistakes in it that they never sent. And we'll come back to how we use that to trick people into giving their credentials away in a second. But that would be my answer. But that's a good question, so I'll open that up to the floor. Ben and James, anything to add to that?
I think from my perspective is leverage the vendors you've got in the space. There are a raft and a plethora of tools and capabilities available within, certainly if you're a Microsoft house, and maybe in space if you've got sort of AWS and cloud environments, there are a plethora of tools that you can, and features you can turn on for a small fee or for free that give you the insight and the visibility. They may not stop things, but they will give you the visibility to take action and do something about, or create a process around. So it's about understanding what you've got in those spaces.
James,
From my
anything to
area,
add to
I think there would be two parts. Mainly, firstly, if you're on a limited budget, the basics of cybersecurity is doing IT well. If you literally get the basics right, you've covered 95% of your issues. Just your patching, your antivirus, your password policies, and your access controls, making sure the right people have the right access and you don't overdo it. And then the other part is essentially knowing what your risks are and what your risk appetite is and focusing on those areas. There's no point getting a great vulnerability scanning tool which is going to scan all of your environment if your devices aren't managed properly. So it's knowing your environment and then addressing the main issues first and doing the fancy stuff later.
I'll also say, and this adds a bit of a nod to the insurance industry, Cyber Essentials, and Cyber Essentials. A small company, it would cost £360, including VAT, to do Cyber Essentials. Now, Chris Enser, who's the Deputy Director of NCSC, who's invented this thing, and I've worked with him for years on and off, I think the stats he's come out with is that 90% of people, and it is aimed at small businesses, by the way, 90% of small businesses who've got Cyber Essentials don't get successfully cyber attacked. Now, that's not a causation thing, but to James's point, Cyber Essentials is a really good methodology that forces you to walk through those things. You get £25,000 worth of free cyber insurance for your 360 quid, or £1,000 if you're a certain size business. I forget the tiers, but if you're between naught and I think it's 100 staff, it's 360 quid. You get £25,000 worth of cyber insurance, but it forces you to go through 49 questions, which effectively makes you do what James has just said there. And the net results are that statistically, people who have that and have properly been through that process, note the word properly, not cut any corners, are significantly less likely to be successfully cyber attacked than those who haven't done that thing. Next question then, Chantal, as I'm flying blind, please.
Amazing. So this one says, in your view, what role does AI and automation play in improving cybersecurity in the contact centers?
Oh, good one. Yeah, who wants to take that first, gentlemen, or would you like me to warm that
I'll
one
take
up?
it first while Ben can have a think, and then I'll
Yes.
pass over to Ben. I think it's going to, a lot of cybersecurity is either data analytics, because at this point in time, it's no longer just having antivirus servers, firewalls. It's being able to correlate all of the data or information from numerous points into a single panel, which a SOC or cyber analysts can actually review and actually take tangible action against, or be able to see something. So my main thing with AI will be, it will be able to help you find that needle in the haystack, because majority of the time you're going to have terabytes and terabytes of logs to look through, and you essentially just need to find out what's going on. I think Ben mentioned earlier about the insider threat, being able to spot what something's doing. It used to be you could just look through logs and go, oh, Joe Bloggs has suddenly logged on at 3 o'clock in the morning. Doesn't really do that. That's a risk. Nowadays, it's a lot more refined, and you'll need to find out work patterns, what they're doing, browsing habits. For someone to do that manually is not going to happen. So I think that's where the AI tools will be able to help by that data analytics.
Can I just add to that, or did you want to go next, Ben?
I would say add to it because James literally stole my answer. It's
Great, good work. I was going to say both into, well, criminals steal personal data, steal PII, and depending on whether you've got people's credit card details or passport number, it's for sale on the dark web between 60 pence and £4 and £100, depending on whether you're a high net worth individual who banks at Coutts or you're just doing your car insurance. Once that stuff's out there, we can generally find it in the dark web, or we see it being traded on the dark web, and that's great. The amount of times throughout my career we've told people things are out there on the dark web, but knowing what to do about it is really difficult. So people have got those details, they're going to try and use them to do something, book a holiday on somebody's credit card, why you book some insurance, I don't know, but they're gonna dial into contact centers or go to websites and do nefarious things with that stolen detail. If you know those details have been stolen and you can use AI, as James says, to find a needle in the haystack, then you've got a significant advantage, because otherwise, in law, I think you then become the victim. You are the person who's given away the product to somebody with stolen details, and then it's down to you to kind of report that crime. I would say, back to saying AI is the current zeitgeist and buzzword, I was using machine learning, not totally AI, in the early 2000s, and one of the networks I used to run was the Police National Network, and the one that had most of the UK government on it. So in cyber, we've been using AI and machine learning in virus protection for years. So this is not a new thing. But to the person who asked the question, and as I think we're saying here, using AI to deal with that massive data, particularly if you can inject data that says you have been attacked and this particular data is dangerous or more suspicious, allowing your human operators to go to a higher level of alert, I think is where I go. And that echoes James's point about dealing with mass call volume issues that we talked about earlier on. So hopefully that answers the question, but if not, come back to us, because Chantel can earn lunchtime money by reading them all out again.
Amazing. I hope that does answer the question. You mentioned ransomware earlier, Andy. And does ransomware impact contact centers, and how does it impact them?
Oh, good question. Gentlemen, did you want me to start that one off, or you got thoughts on that?
I mean, I would see sort of ransomware, the real impact of contact centers would be probably just around, if you're in a ransomware scenario, you're probably in business continuity. You're probably in that scenario where your infrastructure's down, you've spun up your hot sites or your cold sites or whatever the current buzzword terminology in the BC space is. But the contact centers would be impacted because they may not be able to operate in the site that they normally do. They'd have to go to the business continuity site. It would impact because potentially it would stop the contact center from working. But I think the true impact I would see would be from a business continuity perspective.
Yeah, agreed. I think, and I'm gonna sound like a bore now, I think I've done around 20 ransomware simulations in the past couple of years, let's say, with all kinds of C-suites from all kinds of businesses, from government to logistics, etc. And we deliberately make it all around not the IT director, because everybody on the board normally says it's IT director's fault to go and clean up. And normally what we do, and I will hasten to add this in a simulated environment, is take down their teams, take down their communications, take down their website, go crazy on social media, destroy their brand. And I think one of the things I found most executives forget to do is that Joe Public will call their contact center in a panic because they've seen something on the news and ask for help. And in one case, somebody said, well, our contact center's normally shut over the weekend. I'm like, needs to be open now. But people get into this, well, we work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, so nobody's going to call us. Like, that's a really bad answer if your brand is just going down the toilet and all of your customers are being attacked. And I think that's one thing I'll give you with this, that a lot of the ransomwares I've been involved in helping customers through is not the customer themselves, you on this call, being attacked. It's people going after your customers. In one case, an organization had 30 million customers, and I could use DMARC to impersonate their email. All of their details have been stolen, and they had no way to communicate with their customers other than via social media or please call our contact center. In that case, you don't want 30 million people suddenly calling your contact center, but it's the kind of root of people forget that their contact center could be their potentially most trusted way of communicating with their customers when they're in a bad situation. And as Ben said, and you said, James, people like using the phone, talking to humans when it's all going horribly wrong. And I mean, my personal details were stolen when my water company was attacked. They managed that really well. They gave people Experian Credit Lock, other credit locks are available, all these kind of things to look after to make sure that their customers didn't become victims. So I think thinking of your customers being the attack point and you're the helping hand in that, I think it's the thing I spot most C-suites forget that they've got as an asset. They see contact center sometimes as a cost center or this thing that's not open on a Sunday, you know.
Amazing. I hope that answers that question. They're coming in thick and fast now. So the next one is, in the last few years, we've seen the nature of cybersecurity changing and becoming more sophisticated. Given the emerging technologies like quantum computing, what do you think next year's threats will be? Brilliant question.
Oh, I almost have a fiver for the quantum computing question. Who wants to go for that first? Go on,
I don't really
James.
want to touch the quantum computing one. I
Go on,
think when
you get
quantum
CTO in your
computing,
title. You need to talk about quantum computing. Go for it.
yeah, I think from being a complete nerd myself, when quantum computing comes out, I'm very much excited about it, as it's just going to change the whole landscape of computing in every aspect. From a cybersecurity perspective, it will be a nightmare. I think even with, I know there's research going on regarding post-quantum encryption, but unless you're involved in actually quantum computing and actually have a degree in high-level mathematics, I don't think we'll understand the full impact of what will happen when quantum computing comes out. I think a lot of our encryptions and security methodologies we rely on now will require radical change. And if you combine that with AI, the threat landscape will just be completely different to what we're facing now. And we'll have to fall back on the basics of human interactions, making sure that the people, again, are going to be the center of cybersecurity and not be relying so much on it's secure because it's encrypted. It will be it's secure because only these people have access to it for this reason. So a lot of what we do will have to change, and the people will have to be the center of that new model.
So I'm going to add a bit of flavour now. I'm both going to agree and disagree. So I think, first of all, I want to get the big "Don't Panic" sticker on the screen. So the NSA talk about Q Day being 2 years away, and post-quantum encryption is here today already. And I think I'm going to do a blog on this soon. When you look at AES and DS encryption, which have been the backbone of encryption for all of us for years, it's the same algorithm, but you change your keys. And then computers get faster, so you just change your keys faster. If you look back at elliptical curve algorithms, I think they were first, or the concept was first invented by Greek mathematicians 3,000 years ago, or something like that. So if you properly get into post-quantum computing or post-quantum defense, really it says use an algorithm that somebody's not using already. Use one that nobody's heard of. And high-end, top secret government stuff has always been in that kind of space. So the world of quantum computing hurts my head. I will not pretend to understand quantum physics, and anybody who does probably is a bit like an AI salesman who says, or saleswoman who says what the AI is actually going to do. But the ways to defend against it are just use different algorithms, and slightly to what James touched on, use algorithms that you know you're using and you haven't told everybody about. So, like we said at the start of this call, we're all going to be a little bit circumspect about our own cyber defenses, because that's what makes us secure. And I think some of the principles of post-quantum computing do go back to the principles of secrecy 3,000 years ago. So, but I think a lot of the things you'll hear me regularly answer is the problem with cyber today is we get excited about the new sexy stuff, AI, quantum, etc. People haven't turned on DMARC, people haven't shut down this thing over here, people haven't shut this back door. And those things statistically are what make the bigger differences. But we do still need to keep an eye on it. Ben?
And I think I'm just going to jump in and go back to the point you raised earlier about getting and that James touched on about getting the basics right. Because it is simple things like having a better password policy in place. Because entropy is a big thing. So that our ability to sort of, and saying to people, have a password of 14, 16, 20 characters and do number and letter substitution, they get cracked very quickly because attackers know how to sort of what the obvious substitutions are and what A always gets substituted for A, and there's always an exclamation mark at the end, and it's always a capital at the beginning. They know these things, but by using secure passwords or passphrases, that brings in a whole different level of ability to crack and hack passwords, or it takes longer to happen. But things like MFA, multi-factor authentication, is having that sort of enforcing that something you know and something you have is really important. And it's basic fundamental things that I think sometimes, to touch on your point, Andy, people get really hung up on this cool new shiny things with a blinky box with AI powered on sticker on the outside, but actually they've not done the basics of, well, they've got a decent password policy and actually uses proper NCSC guidance of use passphrases, not password policies. Actually don't change your passwords, but use different passwords everywhere. Use a password manager, have multi-factor. Those types of things make it harder, because even if you do put your credentials in, put your MFA token in, it will work for 60 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't do it because it didn't feel right, but I'm almost guaranteeing, Ben's seen me do this trick on stage before, for this audience, I am prepared to bet £20 with somebody, Ben or James, that 50% of the people on this audience, I can impersonate your corporate email without hacking into your email system, without using, and you don't really need to be a proper ethical hacker to do that. If that's new news to you, no, I know. yeah. Can't impersonate yours or Ben's. That's why I deliberately pointed out. Yeah, statistically in the UK, I think we've seen 73% of corporates you can impersonate somebody. The biggest amount of money I've seen somebody lose by somebody doing that, impersonating somebody's email and sending in an invoice and somebody paying it, was £400,000. And that company is now going to court with their customer to get the £400,000 back, which is never a guarantee of long-term business. But what do you do? So people are making 400 grand by doing Billy basic stuff. So you're right. And sorry to get off on the AI quantum computing thing. They are things we should keep in mind.
Just going back to that question, I think the last answer to it will be quantum computing's probably the next thing, but then there'll always be the next thing. And I think it's always going to come down to cybersecurity, and the cyber attacks are very much when it's going to happen, not an if. So it's also just making sure companies, like Ben said, if you get hit with ransomware, that's nightmare scenario. You're in business continuity. So what is your cyber incident response plan? Has it been rehearsed? Making sure you've got that down so you're ready for when your cybersecurity does fail.
Exactly. Yeah. And a phrase that our CTO uses is bounce back ability. And the reason why we do so many ransomware simulations is no matter how much money you throw at this, you're against an enemy who's got $8 trillion. That's the current annual GDP of international cybercrime and fraud. So it's not if, it's when. And so, as you say, James, get ready for the when. But yeah, the point around this is whether it's quantum AI or Billy basic stuff, it is humans trying to attack other humans. And the thing I like about the contact center world is that's an out-of-band channel where humans can, hopefully it's humans, talk to each other, check they're talking to the right human and help each other out. Great. Have we got any more questions, Chantal, in the closing 6 minutes?
We do. I think we'll probably just squeeze this one in. So this one says, how do you manage security risks associated with remote or hybrid contact center agents, especially after what COVID showed us in 2020 to 2021?
That is a brilliant question. And I will throw that across to whichever the gentleman wish to take it, because I know they both live in those worlds. James.
I wasn't sure if Ben had crashed.
That was Ben's thinking phase.
So remote and hybrid is always going to be an interesting one. I'm definitely an advocate for hybrid working. But when you are at home, you are still from a corporate perspective, they're in an uncontrolled environment. So mine will be slightly different to Ben, as what we work on normally is official sensitive, or has some sort of classification and confidentiality regarding it. So it will always come down to what we allow them to work in a hybrid environment and making sure we have the right policies and guidance in place. So if you are remote working, make sure you have a dedicated space where no one in-house can overhear you or can't see your screen, especially for people who live in shared accommodation. That's definitely a thing to consider. It was one of the big things during COVID. People living in shared accommodation, those people aren't vetted. So how can they work from home? Making sure that bit's covered. And then there's a technology element, making sure that they don't have access to certain systems when they're remote. and they only have those systems accessed when they're in the office. So it comes back to the appropriate access levels and also the appropriate risk appetite. If our offices suddenly shut down, we need to make sure our contact center's up. So then what will be the decision making there to make sure remote access can have the elevated access for everything for a short period of time? So again, it just goes down to the risk appetite and making sure the risk versus the appropriate mechanism is in place.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Ben, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's the basics and fundamentals, and if needs be, putting extra layers of control. So you might have a stricter authentication process if someone is working remotely compared to being in the office. If they're in the office, you may not force multi-factor authentication when they're using certain systems, but if they're remote, you might want to turn around and say, okay, you must use multi-factor authentication. Or you must access these systems by these mechanisms. But like James touched on, it's the basics of, do you have your own space to work in? Are you going to be overheard? Is there any sort of potential impact to our customers for you working remotely or working hybridly?
And again, it could be something as simple as a lock screen. When you're in the office, lock screen's X amount of time. If you're at home where you're in an uncontrolled environment, lock screen could be something just as 2 minutes, because if you haven't done anything, we want that to be secured.
Yeah. And I think as well, to add my own personal kind of thoughts on that, and it's back to what we said about the LinkedIn thing. If you've told all of your mates down the pub that you work for Direct Line or British Transport Police or Coutts Bank or whoever, then maybe you've made yourself a victim, in the same way that if you work in a physical bank, you should walk different ways home or maybe get a slightly different bus if you're the bank manager. By having that data or the access to that data, somehow somebody listening in the pub or wherever you go when you're not at work may know that data's in your house, not in this big castle kind of fortress office that people used to go to. Again, if we can help people, as Ben said, to think about those kind of things, not get too paranoid, but just have that extra level of awareness. What we don't want to do is have contact center staff inadvertently become victims and then inadvertently spread that victimization around. Great. Well, I think we've run out of time for questions. That's been super useful, and I've learned stuff, so I hope everybody else has. If it isn't, 7726159 Daisy, and we'll find a way via Chantal of sending out as much free information as we can. I think, Chantal, if anybody else has got other questions, either get hold of us via any of my contact details behind me or via UKCCF, and I think we'd be happy to do a little bit more to help people out. But hopefully, judging by the questions and the great answers, that's helped people, and look forward to seeing you more. But again, thanks for both Ben and James. I know they both got super busy days. Ben's just come back from some days of leave, so we'll have loads of CISO-y kind of issues to deal with, as we all have. But yeah, thanks everyone for taking their time out of their busy days.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be sending follow-up emails. I'll put contact details in there because there are a couple of questions we didn't manage to get to because of time. They'll be sent out afterwards. I just want to say thank you on behalf of UKCCF to Ben and James, and to you, Andy, as well, for chairing the session. It was fantastic. The session was recorded. It'll be available on our website in about 3 hours' time, and it'll be uploaded to YouTube and LinkedIn. And like I said, there will be a follow-up email with all of the information. I've already gone and got all the links for the numbers that you were talking about, Andy, so I'll put those in. For more information on UKCCF and membership, you can visit our website, www.uk-ccf.co.uk, and watch your email boxes as well. We'll be announcing the launch of the 2025 awards very, very shortly, which is very exciting. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and hopefully see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.